guys, we are rolling.
Okay, roll. Funny how rolling used to be an old analog term because tapes would roll, but they still use rolling when it comes to digital, which is quite interesting. But
Yeah. So, Tony,
yes,
welcome.
thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, what do you want to know? Like where do you want to take this? Because there's a lot I can share with you. So
All right. So
let's have a bit of structure here.
I got onto you through Geo.
Yeah.
And
You know, I still haven't met him. We only know each other online. We just click. We just seem to be aligned with similar values, and you know, you get a feel for people. You can read behind the lines, not just between them.
Yeah.
And I just got a sense that he seems like he's my kind of people. And so anyway, he hit me up out of the blue and said, "Come on my friend's podcast." So here we are. So yes,
That's amazing.
I know him.
Yeah. And I guess I got onto him because I wanted to just expand out the caliber of guests on the podcast. Particularly.
Gee, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, mate. You have run out. You have run out of options. Andrew Jarvis, you have run out of options, my friend. This is now where you have now hit the absolute. This is the bottom of the pit. So you can only go up from here, right?
Well, think
after this one, it has to be good by default, right? So
I'm not so sure if it's the bottom of the barrel because you're officially podcast number 51.
Wow. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I've embarked into the 50s.
That's
now, great. Which is so strange because I read somewhere that the top 100 podcasts have 22 episodes because people stop.
They stop. Yeah, I did too. I started a podcast and I think I got to 88 and maybe my inner Asian said, no, because that's a good number, right? 88. Beautiful, perfect number. So
Are you Asian?
I identify as Asian. No. Well, I live in Asia.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Australia is part of Asia, so therefore I am Asian. If you don't like it, well,
yeah. Did you ever live in Asia?
No, look, no. I've had very limited experience in Asia. So I don't know. I guess Singapore, and Hong Kong. About the extent of it, but I've never really cared for the humidity. Yeah, of that part of the world.
It can definitely kill you.
It's not for heat. I can handle heat, but humidity is a bit of a different story.
Yeah. Well, my mum's Indonesian.
Okay.
And I was born in Singapore.
Okay,
so
right.
I spent the first 14 years living in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing place, Singapore. I must say. I mean, forget about the humidity and that, but just how clean it is. And I saw a stat the other day that said, I think it was something like 80% plus of people own their own home. I think you have 99-year leases in Singapore.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the government are the main developers, and so the vast majority of people don't rent. They actually participate in a level of home ownership.
Yep.
Which I guess is probably one of the reasons why that place. And they have, I don't know, can we call him a dictator who runs Singapore? I mean, a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a hard ass, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't muck about.
No.
But again, it's a kind of society where anyone could walk down the street at 3 o'clock and you know that you're not going to get mugged, and you'd have to be either looking for it or just be amongst that small circle of those. Is the secret societies, I think they call them. That love to get in amongst all the nefarious activities.
When I was living there, it was old Singapore, not new Singapore. And new Singapore really came into play when they banned the selling of chewing gum.
Right, yeah, okay.
And it seemed like such an odd thing to do at the time, but what they were trying to do was prove to the rest of Asia and the rest of the world that they could implement a law for such a meaningless thing. They didn't have a chewing gum litter problem. They were just banning the selling of chewing gum.
Right.
So you could actually still go across the border into Malaysia, buy chewing gum, and bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely fine. You just can't sell it.
Right. Okay.
So, so that I think really kind of embarked this whole business orientated structure of we can implement anything, we can control our people, look at how compliant our people are, and then businesses
started to come in and investment
started to come in and be like, oh wow, you're so compliant, you're so compliant, and that's what it is. It is a very compliant nation.
Yeah, and from what I could see, fairly multicultural, not to the same extent as Australia, but but there was a lot of you know obviously the Malays and your native Singaporeans and Chinese and Indians, and I mean there was a relative diverse range of people, all seemingly seem to be all sort of getting along pretty well.
So you stopped your podcast at 88.
No, okay. So I was just having a interview about a whole the Asian thing, but no, I had a guy that was editing for me, and I'm technically I'm not a in fact I've got to be careful because I don't want to put myself down. So there's a fine line between self-deprecation and just kind of being nasty to yourself.
Yeah.
No, I'm not very good with the tech, and so after I had a series of editors, and they all sort of went their own way for varying reasons, and I thought, oh, this is just too hard, so I let it go. But you were telling me about the AI, and we'll eventually I'll have a look into that, and as I switch off my phone. So anyway, what do you want to know about me? You want to know about my background, or you want to know where I'm at, or
your background? So
okay, well,
you were in music and mastering.
I still am. So
you still are?
So today I run what's called so I work in the music industry.
Yeah.
And I'm a mastering engineer. And for those people who don't know what that is, a mastering engineer is the person who takes other people's recordings. Okay, so bands go in the studio, they record them, then those recordings get mixed down into a stereo track, right? And that's where it's all blended and all the balance is all done correctly to get everything sitting nicely. And then I'll take that and run it through a process of optimizing that recording. So if you could imagine people familiar with bass and treble controls or graphic equalizers on music playback devices, just to tune the sound the way you want, well, I do a similar thing but with a bunch of more sophisticated tools in order to enhance and optimize those recordings so that then they can sound good anywhere, whether it comes through your phone, which is where most people are listening to now, or on a big club system or on the radio, and also so for digital release and also for vinyl, which is a slightly different process. But that's what I've been doing as an independent now anyway, since 1991.
Are there different techniques for the different mediums? So you mentioned then like phone versus club versus vinyl, or is it all kind of similar?
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, the only time I would have a different approach to a format is for vinyl. Now, another engineer will come on here and tell you, rubbish, and give you his argument as to it's a different thing for online, different for CD, and look, they may be right. Look, and I'm not going to argue the process with people, if whatever works for them. But I think most master engineers worth their salt would at the very least say vinyl's a different process. So that's the only time I would take a different approach.
How did you get into it?
Well, I tell people that mastering found me. As opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
I, as a youngster, had ambitions of wanting to do something in music. More importantly, I wanted to do something I loved, and that was something I worked out very early in life.
It's important.
Having worked in my father's businesses ever since I was yay high, which is where I got a lot of my work ethic from.
Yeah.
From there, and of course, school holidays sucked, because there were no real holidays. But I do remember watching people. So my dad had a for lack of a better term, we'll call it a canteen, in the 70s in Port Melbourne, amongst some other businesses. But my formative years were spent there, and as a teenager, young adolescent. And this was in the heart of Port Melbourne's industrial hub. This is back in the day when we had a manufacturing base and there was lots of factories, okay?
Yeah.
So my dad had a place there that served the needs of the workers. And I remember vividly, right, because this was really a big pivotal point in my life, Andrew, watching people come in on a Monday morning at 5, because we had to be there 5:30. So 5:30, 6 o'clock, they knock off from the night shift. They come in, or the morning shift would come in, and you'd see these people who just did not want to go to work. It was they were living a life of drudgery. Okay. Now, I love music ever since I was young. I didn't know how I was going to get in the music industry, but I didn't know how that was all going to happen. But it was very clear to me that I wanted to do something I loved doing, because I remember as a kid watching these people said, I don't want that for me. There's no way, no, I'm going to. I've had to do lots of jobs along the way to build my business, but they were all stepping stones. They were not my destiny that I was stuck here. And so watching these people was a real great lesson for me, because it really gave me the impetus and inspiration, if you will, to go, okay, given that I have to work a significant amount of hours of my day, I better find something I love doing. And so music was the thing for me. My dad wasn't feeling it. He wanted me to go down the academic route. He himself was destined to become an academic, and he was the only one pretty much in his family that never got to achieve that. And so he thought he would vicariously do it through me. And we were very much at loggerheads over that. It caused a lot of friction, which only built my resolve, right? So
it's hard when your parents have a particular viewpoint that they want to achieve things through their offspring.
Oh, absolutely. And it's all well-meaning. I mean, at the time when I was young, I didn't see that. I just saw my dad as being a really evil person who, didn't care about me, and it was all about fulfilling, stroking his own ego and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there was maybe a bit of that, but I understand now that he meant well. He did. I mean, he always used to say, "Look, nothing wrong with music. It's a great hobby." Because my dad was a hi-fi enthusiast. I mean, that's how I pretty much. My introduction to music was through playing around with my dad's gear. He had reel-to-reel machines and amps and stuff, and used to get right into it. From 7, I remember threading up the machines and loving it, being fascinated with sound and stuff, and listening to the radio all the time. Yeah. But he always, my dad thought music, great hobby, but not as a career path.
I think because it was because it's the creative space, and back in the day, the creative space wasn't really a form of stability or a viable form for income.
And and I'd even say even today, I still see it where I'll share an interesting story. I heard a conversation once on a tram, and it seemed there was let's just say an older lady and a youngster. They're having a conversation, and I picked up on it. I remember the lady saying, "So what do you do?" And he said, "Oh, I'm an artist." She said, "Oh, that's nice. But what do you do?" He said, "I'm an artist." Goes, "I know you said that. That's nice, but what do you do?" So no recognition that being an artist or a creative was a viable thing. And yes, look, it's a tough gig. It always has been a tough gig. There's always been. And I guess even in law, there's always going to be that 5 or 10% of the upper echelon who are going to be making big bucks, being really successful, having very, very high profile. You look at any industry, panel beaters, tradies, it doesn't matter. The same thing happens in music. I believe that artists and creatives, I like to think we're all creative. We all are creators in our own right. But the people that go out there and work hard towards wanting to become full-time at it, I believe they don't choose that as much as it chose them. And in the same way, I feel that about myself. Mm. And this is why we're talking about mastering. I think it found me. I was into music. I used to collect records, and I wanted to become an engineer because all I knew, I used to read all the credits on the records and say, produced by, mixed by. That was pretty much most. Those credits were quite often, but very rarely. If, in fact, I only can recall once seeing a mastering engineer get credited. And it was Wally Trigo, God rest his soul, from Capitol Records. And I'm talking back in the 70s, okay? And I thought, what's this? Anyway, I had no idea. It wasn't until I went to New York as a youngster and was introduced to mastering for the first time, because I had no idea what it was like. And when I saw the process of it and the speed of it and the fact that you got to the opportunity to work on many different projects, because it was a high turnover kind of thing. Mixing a record could take days or even weeks, possibly months, depending on if it was an album big, and it could become very laborious. Whereas with mastering, even if you didn't necessarily like what you were working on, it didn't matter because there'd be something else to replace it fairly quickly. And it also opened you up to a greater range of music. I grew up and enjoyed a broad range of music, so I thought, great, I'm going to get to hear all these different things. Some things I'm going to like more than others, but nonetheless, I got the exposure. And so when I saw this and realized that, it was said to me, look, you got two choices. You can either stay in the studio, build your way up. It'll take you a few years to go from a runner, which is the person that does all the menial work. And as I said, you just run around. You're basically outside the studio waiting to be told, get a coffee, get a sub, get me this, get me that, clean the ashtrays, roll the spliffs, all that kind of bizzo. And then maybe you'll be promoted to become an assistant engineer. And then you might become an in-house engineer. But there was 400 or 500 people outside waiting for their opportunity just to clean the latrines, sell their mothers for the opportunity. Or you could step into this role, which had no real prestige, no real profile, but availability. So I took a pragmatic decision to go, you know what? Bugger being a rock star. I'm not here because I want to be a rock star. I'm here because look, my motivation was I want to do something I love doing. If I'm going to spend time working, I better find the thing I love to do. Yeah. And if this is going to help me get there sooner, then I'm going down that path, right? And so that's why I tell people mastering found me. And even to this day, it's still one of those things that people are mystified by, people still confuse. And again, no one really is a rock star in the mastering world. I mean, there's a few guys up there who are people in the music industry who know them, and they're kind of household names, but they're nowhere near have the same kind of status and financial reward that comes with it too, as being a big name producer, a big name mix engineer.
I think it's interesting, like your the fact that you can trail it right back, pinpoint it right back to your dad and seeing these other people coming into the canteen and making a conscious decision that you wanted to do something that you loved. And then when you were at home with your dad, like you were like listening to his music and he was like getting you involved and all of that, and you really loved that whole piece and all of that, What was New York like?
Crazy.
Yeah.
New York 80s, mental for for a little bit of time I was there, or quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
But I never actually held a job during that time. For many years, I used to have imposter syndrome, right? Even though I've done very well in my career and I'm known, at least in Australia, I had imposter syndrome for so long because unlike all my other peers and contemporaries, everyone went through a very classical process, which is you get in on the ground floor, you sweep the floors, you clean the ashtrays, you do all the menial work, and it's a slow, steady thing. Whereas for me, I just went to different studios and availed myself and said, hey, can I come and learn? And I was very fortunate that because I went over to America and Canada and with very little to no money, but just this burning ambition and real interest. These people are interested in, and being Australian too, I think there was this sense of novelty for them.
Yeah.
But I think they were just impressed by the fact that I was so driven and so passionate, so enthusiastic that they'd allow me to, they gave me the time of day. And as someone who mentors people today and someone who now is a public speaker who wants to inspire youngsters predominantly who want to be artistic creatives, you never forget the impact that has on you. That someone who you look up to, someone who has a reputation, will look at you and not look down upon you and will treat you with respect and give you the time of day and answer your questions and not make you feel like an idiot.
100%.
That just left such an indelible mark on me. And I remember, again, another moment where as a youngster, being in some of these mastering studios and going, look, if I ever reach this level where I get to work in a room like this, I will make sure that I will pay that forward. I made a deal with the universe, if you will, that, get me here, I said, and I'll do that. And it took a long, long time before I got to my very own studio. It was a dream studio that I've had in Brunswick now since 2006. But I'm pleased to say that I've been able to fulfill that obligation of doing that. And now to a point where I find myself at 62. I'm not sorry, 61. I'm heading towards 62. But still wanting to do that, to be a speaker and a mentor and to help young kids out. And not just young kids, Andrew, but also I have a passion to wanting to work with middle-aged men, the middle-aged men who are lost, the men who are overweight. I used to be overweight myself. I used to weigh 170 kilos. About 14, I was right at death's door. Dr. told me I was 47. So I don't want to scare you, but you're not going to see 50 once your kids grow up. I had type 2 diabetes, just absolutely just a mess. I was addicted to drugs. I was in a very unhappy marriage. Mind you, my wife she was unhappy too, but so I don't want to say it's all, all one-way traffic, but it was a very unhappy marriage.
Yeah.
And I've come through all of that, right? So, and there's a lot of men out there who struggle with life. Middle-aged men, the so-called midlife crisis, as as culturally we've been told exists. Okay,
yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow to realize that you're kind of like going through things and you can't cope, so you actually have to like reach out and ask for help.
Yeah,
and I think as men, there's what's the word? There's pride at stake. There's
it's ego. It's your ego and your sense of guilt and shame, because as men we're meant to be performers. We're meant to be the guys who are killing it, and if we're not seen to be, then there's going to be a facade, and at least there'll be some exaggeration perhaps, and the version of you that you want to project to the world. Whereas behind all of that, a lot of men are really, really struggling, and I know because I used to be one of them. People used to think I used to be a very jovial, happy, outgoing kind of guy, and again, that was the appearance. And when you do something for long enough, you eventually become good at it, where you're not just convincing others, but more dangerously, you're kidding yourself. And that's when it gets really, really can get dicey. Because then if you start, kidding yourself, oh boy, you can go down a real slippery slope. So I understand all of that. But more importantly, it's not just the understanding of all those things, but having had my own journey to overcome all those things and go, okay, well, look, you know what? I don't have all the answers, but I have had my own pathways of what worked for me. And look, here's the before, here's the after. So all this stuff is there. The evidence, if you will, is there to be seen and documented, and not just something that happened overnight or that I've only managed to maintain for a short period of time. I've been fit and healthy and happy now for the better part of the last 14 years, all right, where my weight has been stable. the cocaine particularly hasn't been an issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's enough there to be able to say, look, there's enough here for me to prove to you that I've got enough skin in the game to speak from some experience and, for lack of a better word, authority for you.
Yeah, but also authenticity as well.
Yeah.
I think because there's I see a lot of like people online, particularly like in the fitness industry, that are like, oh, you've got to do this and you got to do that, da, da, da. And then it's kind of like, oh, really? Like, is that actually? So there's, people will do things just to make a buck, and like.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of so-called influencers out there that will do their research and work out, okay, where's the demand, so to speak, and they will try and position themselves a certain way. And unfortunately, even in the personal development space, there's a lot of chicanery and tomfoolery and people that are I mean, I remember there were guys who I looked up to, and I don't want to name them just out of respect, but after meeting these people and finding out when the camera was off and the mic was off who they really were, I was devastated. I really was. And it was a good lesson for me, to not pedestalize people.
Yeah.
Right? Because I made that mistake of putting these people up there because I thought they were better than me somehow.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
We all end up idolizing whoever it is and not realizing that they're just like everyday normal people.
Well, they are, but also they say comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to look at someone, admire them, respect them, and be inspired by that and use that as some kind of a mark, but by the same token, not to attribute your self-worth to whether you meet those lofty standards or not. Plus, these people, we don't know the background. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, So what are you really comparing to? Are you comparing apples to apples? There's so much that people don't think about. They just see what's presented there, which for the most part is at best somewhat embellished.
Yeah.
And at worst fabricated. You know what I mean? So I think we've got to be careful of that. And if there's going to be a competition, let's if you really want to be competitive, well, compete against yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you do a little bit better this week than what you did last week? And if you can, and you can make steps in your life, whether it's you want to lose weight or you're trying to kick a habit or you're trying to build a better relationship or build a business or whatever it is that you're looking at to achieve or to improve upon, can I do a little bit better over the period of time? And not to underestimate the small things, the little wins, if you will, 1,000 millimeters to make a meter, right? And often a big mistake I know I made, and others do make, but I'll speak for myself. One of the big mistakes I've made is that I was always looking ahead, which is fine. I'm driven, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, without stopping every now and again to pause and just have a look over my shoulder and go, wow, look how far I've come, because people just think, oh, that's done now. Well, I'm over it. I don't care for that. And more. And the problem with that is that you'll never be satisfied. You're never going to be satisfied.
Yeah.
Because there's always more to achieve. There's always more to get. There's always more to have, right? Now, that doesn't mean take your foot off the accelerator and rest on your laurels and just kind of drop everything. But it's important, though, to celebrate those things and just to be grateful that you're on a journey. You're enjoying a process, it's ongoing, and that it's fun. And so long as you can tick those boxes, then you have less chance of slipping up or slipping up too much or too badly.
Yeah, and I think it is. So I agree with everything that you've just said. I also think that if you fall in love with the process or you fall in love with the journey, it doesn't matter what the outcome is. The outcome is just a byproduct of what you're actually doing, and the process of continually improving yourself, continually taking the right steps, every day, and looking over your shoulder and reflecting on how far you've come and realizing that, you know what, you are on the right path or whatnot, as opposed to going, at the start going, I could go this way or I could go that way, like half a degree to the right, that half a degree to the right over a time period is going to be in a completely different space.
Absolutely.
Than if you took stock every now and then, reflected and going, am I pointing into the right direction? You know? And so, yeah, I've spoken a lot on the podcast about falling in love with the journey, falling in love with the process that you go through to you know, enjoy the things that you do as opposed to the outcome. Because I think sometimes if you set a goal and then you achieve it and then it's kind of like, okay, well, what now?
Yeah.
What? And I guess that drives that behavior of always wanting the next thing, always, you know, we as you say, it's not a bad thing, but it's like you just need to like take stock.
And on the topic of goals, what I'd like to share with you and your audience is that we often talk about goals and goal setting, and I think it's really important. It's great. But one of the things that people overlook, and certainly was a great lesson for me, is that while goals and goal setting are great in and of themselves, I think the most important part about goals and goal setting is not so much about reaching the goal. It's great because you reach a goal and then you want to set new ones. But the most important thing is to remember is not so much about the goal, but who you have to become in the process of getting to the goal. As an example, let's just say you want to get rid of some weight. You set a target, 20 kilograms in 6 months, okay? And you fall short of the mark. You only, say, get 10, all right? Most people would think that's a failure. But over that 6 month period, you still managed to release 10 kilograms. You would have had to learn a little bit about nutrition. You would have had to learn a little bit about training and exercise and diet and lifestyle. You would have had to adjust your mindset somewhat. More than likely, you would have had to made a new peer group or changed a few people in your circle, because I believe peer group is absolutely vital, or the people who are in your close circle in terms of where you go in life. The old adage of Jim Rohn, the average of 5 people, I think is very true. So you still made changes, and you've changed, you've evolved, you've had to evolve to a point. And while you haven't got rid of the 20 kilos, okay, you got 10, but you know what? Now you build up some momentum and a platform to say, okay, I'm going to now set another goal to get rid of that other 10. And so you do it over 12 months for argument's sake. But hey, who cares?
Yeah.
You're going to reach it, or at least get much closer to it.
That's right.
And so who you become and the habits you form and the changes you make is really where it's at, because that's what's going to set you up. What's the new blueprint that you create in order to become, to get to the next thing, set you up, to condition you, to get you stronger, to build your resilience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's, people sometimes forget about that. I know I did. And until that was introduced to me as a concept, and it really made me think, wow, there's something in this. And I think that when you are mindful of that, that's going to help you actually do better, inspire you more, and more importantly, continue rather than just give up and throw it all away.
Yeah, and I certainly find that a lot of people are starting things and then just like giving up and not realizing that, potentially they've set a goal that's, either too hard or not achievable in the time frame that they thought that they were going to do it. And so then they just give up, which is why my whole aspect of fall in love with the journey, doesn't matter what the outcome is, you'll always kind of get there as long as you love doing what you're doing.
And I don't even think there's a getting there as much as you're there. You're already there. You're here. You're doing it, right? Yeah. So there's no, again, the cliche as it is, no destination really. There's no end point to all of this. It's just an ongoing thing.
That's right.
And so while you're in it, hey, you're there.
And that's interesting because, like, when I was a photographer, my whole idea was, I want to be a photographer and I want to be a traveling photographer. And I set a goal of like, okay, in the next 3 years, I'll start touring and start traveling. And then I remember having a conversation with a business partner, and he was like, "Why is it 3 years? Why don't you just start traveling now? Like, test the waters out and like do that." So I did like 3 years. I started 3 years earlier, and I did 3 consecutive years of touring, and I was like, "Holy shit! Like, am I actually a touring photographer now?" Like, and people were contacting me saying, "Hey, when are you coming to our capital city or our state? All this. Like, what are your dates and stuff?" So, so that's it's interesting, the piece around living in the now and realizing that your goal is where you are.
Yeah,
you know, as opposed to this idealistic view of it's like further on down the road.
Yeah. You know, and when people fall into the other trap of I will be happy when I get to this or when I achieve this. And what if you don't get there? Then you're going to rob yourself of being happy? And I say this too as someone who didn't do this for a vast majority of my life. I'm the classic late bloomer, my friend. You know, so I'm being very honest.
That's okay.
No, it's more than okay. I wear it as a badge of honor, because I believe in this adage of I arrived late to the party, but it's better to be late than a no-show.
Yeah.
Right. And also, again, to give hope to other people, because I think, especially I think as people get older in life, again, this middle age thing, they feel that it's over, it's finished. They had one crack at it when they were young, and now that they're in their 40s and 50s, I mean, geez, dude, I'm starting a new career at 61 years of age, and I've had my moments of my self-doubt and a little critic inside, but when I managed to, thankfully, I'm much better these days at identifying the negative self-talk and seeing it for what it is and releasing it. And then adopting the thought of, hang on a minute, what a great story I have an opportunity to author, to be able to say, here I am at 61, starting something new, and imagine what a great story I can tell 5 years from now. Now, I have no delusions of grandeur with what I'm doing, but I certainly have a belief that I will do okay with this, okay? And
I actually really love that. I love the fact that you're embarking on something new, regardless of your age, because age is just a number. You can start something new every single day.
Yeah, and also that something I love. Again, it's still my values of I will only do what I love to do, especially if it comes to in the context of a living, right? And I'll probably have to do some things along the way, and that's fine. Like I said, doing those jobs that you really don't want to do are just the stepping stones and just get you a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. Yeah. So here's an opportunity for me to write a really, really great chapter of someone who, 61, can embark on something new, and again, it's a process too. So again, I'm mindful that I want to take my own advice, because again, if I'm going to be the guy out there talking about this stuff, I better at the very least be congruent and consistent, right? I'm not perfect. I'll muck up. I'll make errors of judgment and make mistakes, and that's fine. I accept that. But at the very least, I've got to be an example, right, to other people. And if you want to inspire people, be an example and an invitation. That's the best way to do it. If you really want to influence people, that's the best way to do it. Certainly, for me, the people that inspired me were always examples and invitations, and made me sort of go, wow, I would love to be more like that, or I see aspects of myself in that person. I'm going to embrace those qualities and roll with it.
So you touched on it before when you were talking about going to New York and having a bit of imposter syndrome.
A lot of it.
Do you feel like because you're embarking on something new now, you kind of feel like that's like you're getting a little bit of imposter syndrome again?
I wouldn't say imposter syndrome because in terms of what I'm speaking about is coming from a place of I can be authentic because I've actually got something to show for it. There's a track record.
Yeah.
Whereas in the engineering aspect of things, because my pathway to becoming one was so different to everyone else's, I felt like, okay, I can't be as legit as everyone else because I wasn't in that club. I didn't come through that system.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I don't feel like an imposter because on the subject material that I speak about is from actual real world experience. And as I said earlier on, a track record and evidence, if you will, to support all this stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not at the same echelon as other speakers out there in terms of notoriety or profile and whatnot. But again, I can't compare myself to these people. It's not fair to do that because these are people that have been doing it 30 years, 40 years of their life. And so they've been able to dedicate their entire lifetime towards building that. Again, didn't happen overnight. They didn't wake up one day and here we are, as best-selling authors and filling arenas. And again, I don't have delusions of grandeur. My aim is to be able to get to a level where I can do this 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And if it gives me enough to pay my bills and have a little walking around money. But more importantly, the motivation isn't the money or the prestige or anything like that as much as it's about, can I impact on people's lives? Can I impact on people's lives in the same way others had impacted on me? Can I pay forward that pivotal moment to someone where someone comes to you and they're at a low ebb, or someone comes to you because they heard something you wrote or something you said and it made them think. And again, we're talking about, with that 1 degree of separation, right? Were you that person that created that? Was I that domino that created just enough force, right, that tipped them into a path towards something better?
Yeah.
I mean, that's beautiful when that happens. Now, you won't always hear it from people, and that's okay. And I'm not sitting here waiting for people to come and tell me, oh wow, that was amazing. But when you do, it's very rewarding, to know.
It would be.
And I think no amount of money can really replace that feeling of knowing that, wow, you actually did change someone's life, or you provided the impetus for them to change it. They had to do the work, right? My words alone isn't going to do it.
I have to apologise. I wasn't calling you an imposter.
No, not at all. Not. I understand the context. I understand. Yeah. And I think, and in all fairness to you, it was a legitimate question to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's real interesting because you're embarking on something new to help create a environment or situation where people can self-reflect and go, do I want to make a positive impact on my own life by talking to Tony, what Tony's telling me, and like, as you say, that 1 degree of separation, that 1 degree in another direction can have a huge impact over 5, 10, 15 years to the individual to help them be happier in what they're doing or be able to have greater purpose in what their life is about. I myself suffered from imposter syndrome. So I mentioned lived in Southeast Asia. I'm one of 3. At the time I was the most Asian looking of my siblings, and the tallest. So at 12, I was like 6 foot. So stuck out like a sore thumb everywhere. And then when we moved to Australia, like the racism happened. So not only was I tall and I was Asian, I had an American accent.
Right. Yep.
And so that was all really foreign to people, right? And so racism, impacted me quite a bit. And what I ended up doing was I ended up looking at people and looking at characters going, I like that aspect of that person and I like that aspect of that person. I tried to like make it my own, like with all these combinations of, characteristics. And then in my 20s, like I tried to like live that out. And it's only in my 30s that I was like, shit, like, who am I? What am I doing? And like, what am I about? And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, no, I'm rock solid. Like, I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I know that I'm not perfect. I know that I'm currently going through something and I'm seeking help, you know? And yeah, like, so I think everyone at some point will go through imposter syndrome at any point in their life. But when you're a creative, you have a greater sense. I feel I had a greater sense of being an imposter because I was self-taught. I didn't know how to do. I didn't know what was right. I went to one workshop and I loved the photographer who was holding the workshop, Peter Colson, and I was like, I want to be like him. And so I really kind of like embarked on trying to be like him. And yeah, and then 11 years later, you know, as I mentioned before, I gave it up.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to do something else.
Yeah. You know, I think the imposter syndrome thing is more widespread than you believe. I remember maybe 5 years ago now, I wrote a post on Facebook where I spoke about it very candidly about my own journey with it. And the amount of response I got, there was some online, but offline in my DMs from people in my industry who were higher profile than me and just tell me, oh my God, thanks so much for saying that, but you got no idea how I still feel this way. And I'm going, are you for real, dude? You know? And these are guys who, when I say guys, it wasn't that many. It was a couple who it just floored me, but it also didn't surprise me. Yeah. And I think quite often people, artists and creatives particularly, we're a sensitive bunch. So things hit us a lot harder. So the highs are higher and the lows tend to be a little bit lower. But not just that, when it comes to the whole imposter thing, when we don't accept ourselves or if our self-esteem isn't at an optimal level, and I'll speak for myself here, for a long period of time, people would say, oh my God, you're so good at what you do. This is great. And I would just fob it off, right? Because I didn't want to accept that because I thought mistakenly that's how I'm going to keep myself in check and keep myself humble and appear somewhat humble, right? And it was this guy called Carlos who was I hate to use the word therapist, but he was a counselor guy I'll go and talk to. And he challenged me on that. And he said, and I'm going to share this with people if they are listening and thinking that if they really are doing well in what they're doing and they still feel like they're imposters, I'm going to share this with you in the hope that something you might want to consider. Okay. So he said to me, okay, so you're an imposter, yeah? Yeah. So, okay, so what you're telling, so this is Carlos speaking, he goes, so you're telling me that these people that come to you because you're some special charity case? What, they're sorry for you? They're coming to you, they've got in their careers, which are really important. You're at the final step of this process, so it's a make or break of sorts. Because after it leaves your hands, that's it. That's how the public are going to listen to it. You're the final check and balance, and they're going to entrust you with something as important as that because they feel sorry for you. And that really floored me. That really made me go, wow, I never ever thought of it like that. Said, no. He said, so, and think about this. He said, how many times have you complimented people in your life? I said, I do it all the time. Oh, so therefore you're disingenuous. How would you like? I mean, these people are gifting you. They're paying you a compliment. It's like a gift, and you're just fobbing them off because your ego is telling you something else. How does it work with you? How would you feel if someone just fobbed it off? You wouldn't feel very good about it.
No, not at all.
And so that was really profound for me, and just stopped me and made me go, wow, okay. I really need to address this and think about this a little bit differently. Now, having said that, we conflate, I think, quite often humility and self-deprecation. And this is where I think we need an awareness to our thoughts and the inner dialogue and understand that, yes, we always have room to grow and to improve, but also to be able to acknowledge, again, this whole thing of like, look how far you've come. Like, look at where you are now compared to where you were. And the fact that if you are an artist or creative and you're making a living off your craft, you must have reached some level of competence to be able to do it. Because again, you're not a charity case. No one's coming to see you out of sympathy, right? So accept that, celebrate that, have your moment where you go, wow, this is amazing. And then go, okay, I still need to improve. I still want to get ahead. I still want to learn new things. That's all fine and dandy. And when people come to you and they say to you, hey, great job, just accept it. Just say thank you.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. Just say thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it. And move on.
It's hard, I think, for people to just sit in it and accept it and be humble enough to go, you know what? This is it. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm present. I don't need to do anything else, be it that day or that week or whatever. Like, I'm here. A lot of that, I think, is driven by the day and age that we're in right now, like with technology and social media. It's like so fast. Things move so fast, and we feel like we have to be moving so fast. Like when you think about it, like technology over the last 10 years, 20 years has moved so fast.
Oh, yeah.
And evolved so fast. We haven't evolved for like millions of years.
That's right. And as a society, it's just as far as how we function, how we operate. We're savages. We're still savages.
Yeah. So how can we have such great expectations on ourselves when our own biology hasn't even evolved?
Yep, that's right.
And I think that inner dialogue is the space in which you need to like take control and like realize that, it might be a complete traffic jam or like, a flurry of activity in your mind in terms of your thoughts, but like just sitting there, realizing that and going, you know what, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree anymore.
So, okay, so you did mastering. So now you're focusing on public speaking.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how is that going?
Well, I've been speaking for a long period of time, but not in that formal sense of, so speaking is something I've done through many, many years, predominantly going to the audio schools and talking about my mastering. So I'd be there as a guest lecturer.
Yep.
And they'd call me and say, look, we'd like you to talk about what you do, a little bit about it, give people a bit of a Mastering 101 class. And so I did that, and I enjoyed doing that a great deal. But there was a part of me that knew that the vast majority of people who turned up to that class weren't necessarily really interested in mastering or didn't, they were there to learn a bit about it, but the majority of those kids there wanted to be, as I was back in the day, become producers and mix engineers and stuff like that. But I think I'd be generous if I said 5 out of that 100 kids were there because they went into this course to become master engineers, okay?
Yeah.
So I would do the talk, but I thought, I'm going to give these kids a little extra value, and that value came in giving them something which I knew at least, let's just say 80% of those kids wanted, which was a full-time career. All right? I knew they were there for a reason because they wanted to go out there in the real world and make it happen. So I thought, okay, I'll do the mastering talk because that's what I've signed up for and being paid for, but let's give them a little extra thing, a 5-10 minute pep talk, if you will, and with a few great lessons that I learned, a few things to consider about, what do you do after you get this degree? And I remember the feedback I'd get from these schools was, "Oh, thanks, man, it was a great talk. Everyone really liked it, but you know what? That last 10 minutes really blew people away. I
was half expecting something else.
Yeah,
So they loved it.
They did. They really did. I mean, mind you, back then I used to be very sweary. It didn't work. I used to get a lot of pushback from people because, my language probably was a little bit too raw, a little bit too raw.
Yeah.
But that aside, they really loved that last bit, and so that got me thinking. Okay, well, if you just want to look at it purely from a supply and demand thing, more people are interested in that. Like, how do I make a living? How do I embrace my creativity? What do I do with this degree? How do I make it, so to speak? And so that's been an ongoing passion. So quite often in what I post about, there would be, motivational stuff and stuff about life and lessons. And over time, I've become more and more transparent with my journey and started talking more about. I'm the guy that will focus more on where I went wrong, and I do so because not for shock value but I think it's important that I think people can relate to that, because a lot of people just focus on where they go wrong, and they think that if they do things wrong, it's the end of their life and there's no turning back. And so I share the failings. Not just for that in and of itself, but also to say, look, yes, I went wrong. I made some bad decisions. I really messed up quite badly, but I've managed to turn it around, and I'm still on an ongoing journey with it all. So I'm not saying that I'm, up here and you guys are down here, all right? So I've been quite brutal and honest about my journey, as a way to hopefully inspire others to go, look, this is what can be done, and it's relatable, and that they don't feel alone. It's not this whole idea of, the personal development space where, what do you see? Again, we're talking before about the filters and the facade of, like, here I'm rocking a Lamborghini and I'm, earning $350,000 a month, and I'm rocking it in Dubai, and I got, I'm running hot and cold running supermodels at my whim. I'm flexing a Rolex, all of that sort of cliche kind of stuff, right? But how many of those people really sit there and they want to talk about, there was a time, or they may just gloss over it, but how many constantly will just keep reminding you that, you know what, I mucked up here and I mucked up there and I made mistakes here and I made mistakes there. It's really, really important. And for a lot of people, it can be difficult to listen to, but the fact is, it's the truth. It's reality.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you talk to people who play on the stock market. They'll only ever tell you
the winnings.
The winnings. They won't tell you
or gambling.
What they've lost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the secret sauce is in the losses. It's in the failures, because if anything, that's knowledge that you'll only ever gain by experiencing it. And if that's what you're talking about, you're helping other people not make those same mistakes, or to at least see markers of what could be happening to them, so that they are prepared enough to go, you know what, I need to make a change, or I need to do something different, or I need to take a different direction,
Yeah.
And it's, whether or not, they decide to make the change or listen in, I think you're really doing a service for the whole community.
Thanks, mate. No.
Yeah.
Well, I hope so. Look, I guess it only really becomes a service if people act on it. It's like with the whole thing about failing. It's the failure is one thing, but then what do you do with it? Do you actually acknowledge it and take it on board and go, right, I'm going to make sure that I won't repeat the same mistake? Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over, that old saying, do what you've always done, get what you always got. So again, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh my God, I love to fail. I just live to fail. It sucks. It does. Falling over, getting it wrong.
It does.
It does.
Suck.
And there's consequences that go along with that. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But so long as you don't, again, it's that whole, as long as you don't attribute yourself to that and you don't identify with that and you don't hold on to that and you just go, okay, that hurt, that sucked. But you know what? I'm now going to make sure that the next time I find myself in that situation, I won't repeat the same thing. I won't say the same thing. I'm going to listen to the feedback of the universe, the feedback, like your body's a feedback mechanism, you know. If you don't listen to it, if you're not present, if you're not observant, if you don't take it on board and make the necessary change, well, no change is ever going to happen. It's just going to be a cycle of continuance, yeah? So celebrate the failing in the sense that it's just feedback, and then more importantly, do something with it, do something about it. Maybe fail in a different way, or at least, you know, overcome that and do something better.
I guess where some people might be hesitant with the word fail is because they see it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, it's a learning.
That's it.
From an experience that you're having, and that's all that it is. Like, yeah, it could be feedback that you're getting from the environment. It could be feedback that you're getting from a situation or from someone or whatnot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were doing the wrong thing. It just could have been the environment. It could have been the situation.
Yeah, could have been other factors. But
yeah,
again, once we can learn to reframe it as just, like I said, feedback. That's all. It's just a result. A result. That's it. A result to these actions, right? That brought that. Okay, let's try a different set of actions and see where that takes us. And maybe you fail a little bit less, you know. So,
did you, when you were doing your mastering? I don't know, you're still doing it, but when you're in like your peak, like, did you have lots of lessons? Like when you, like, did you fail a lot? Like,
I guess I don't know if I'd even necessarily call it failings as much as just, again, well, when I did this, that was going to happen. Oh, geez, you know. And just developing a workflow and a muscle memory and a way of doing things and understanding that, when I and through experimentation as well. I mean, which is, I guess, deliberate failing. Like, I wonder what happens when I do this and I do that. And I know that's probably not what I'm supposed to do, but for shits and giggles, let's just see what happens. Yeah. Because that's where the genius usually comes through. You know, doing those things that are unorthodox or that aren't in the rule book, as it were. So I guess it's like all of us, you know, we're learning about learning. We all go through these phases of learning where we start off something where we are unconsciously incompetent. So when we start with as an example, I'm just going to be a bit of Japanese salsa dancing. Okay, let's just say there's such a thing as, you know. Yeah. But at the beginning, when we start, we know nothing, and we know nothing. Which we're consciously or maybe even unconscious, but we're incompetent. Okay. Yeah. And then we start learning the lessons, and then we're going to make mistakes, and we should have been turning this way, and we should have been turning that way, and that's that phase where we become consciously incompetent. We know that we're not good at it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's when the real learning happens. That's when this thing called myelinization happens in your brain. That's the neuroplasticity starts to happen. But that's where you actually learn. It's through those errors. Okay. And then as you start doing less and less of those errors, you get to the level where you become consciously competent. So you're pretty good at doing this dance. And you're aware of it. 'Cause, you know, okay, I'm starting to
the Japanese salsa.
You start getting, you know, and then when you get to the real mastery, you become unconsciously competent.
Yes.
Okay. That's when you see the people that make it look like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
They just make it look so easy because they don't have to think about it anymore. They're just in flow. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah, and it's muscle memory, right?
Yeah. right? Just through practice and getting it wrong over and over and over until they start getting it right.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with my mastering. It was, again, I had to think about, okay, I need to dial this. And whereas now I don't really have to think too much about it. It's again, not because I'm a robot or a zombie, but now if I hear something, I'll just go, okay, I hear where it needs to go. I got these tools. I know what I need, how much of this and how much of that. It happens fairly quick, and it should. You'd hope to after 40 years of doing it, right? So if you're not, then something's going askew, right?
Yeah, if you're not, then potentially, again, it's that 1 degree. Like maybe you took the wrong approach 25 years ago, and that's where you are today, 40 years.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
The Olympics are on right now, and like all of those athletes will just be on muscle memory.
Oh, for sure.
You know, doing the things that they do to be able to compete at the level that they're at.
And I'd also say, even though they're athletes, they're also working a lot in the mental space as well, because you can have an athlete. Again, I'm not an athlete. I mean, I go to the gym, but I'm certainly not an elite athlete. But I know that, you know, there are athletes who can be really well trained and really good, but on the day when it comes to performing, if they're not calm and they're centered and they're focused, and something gets in their head and they get concerned and distracted, they're not going to perform as well as somebody who may not be as good or as strong, but because in their mind they're just so clear and they're so focused and they're so in the moment where they can, you know, pull a rabbit out of their ass and pull a personal best because something happened. So I think, yes, you're right. They're trained and drilled to the point where it's automatic and muscle memory. But I also think the mental aspect is quite often, I think, what's going to get people over the line more than anything else.
Yeah, and it's and people always forget, like the brain is also a memory. It is also a muscle as well, and you need to
use it.
You need to use it. You need to be, working it.
Totally.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
And the bit that I like with what you've said so far is this, one, you're at the age that you're at and you're starting something new. I believe learning something new is actually a skill.
Absolutely.
It's totally a skill because, there's that saying, can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think the reason for that is because individuals don't prioritize the thirst for knowledge, the thirst for learning something new. And so then what happens is the synapses in your brain fuse and they get stronger, and then you end up losing that ability. Like when we were all kids, we had a very malleable brain that absorbed absolutely everything. We absorbed the words that our parents were saying. We absorbed the behaviors that our eyeballs were watching.
Yeah.
And we mimicked.
Yeah.
Right. And
also our brain's in that alpha mode. We're in this beta mode most of the time. We're conscious. So I think when we're this is why meditation, a lot of people really want meditation, sort of slow down the brain waves down to that alpha frequency, which is where you're prone to suggestion and taking things in, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where a lot of kids are in that alpha state. This is why they seem like they're not really there, they're sort of almost dreamy. But the reality is, like you said, they're just absorbing like a sponge, man. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
My sister used to say to me when we were younger, she's the sponge analogy. She's like, do you ever fucking say anything? Because, like, I'm telling you heaps of stuff and you're just, like, acting like a sponge. And I'm like, So that characteristic of that aspect of, like, being open, learning new things, not being afraid to start something new and like kick it off, and then I admire people who take the initiative take the initiative to start something new, because if it's something that they're passionate about, like it doesn't matter what it is. Like if you're passionate about it, that authenticity and that enthusiasm is going to kind of come through regardless, you know, and it just sounds like the life experiences that you've had, you've really, and I said this before, like you've got this platform and this knowledge to be able to impact so many people. Like it's amazing.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
To those who are open to it. Yeah.
Yeah. To those that are open to it, but also, you know, you may get those devil's advocates kind of, you know, and if you're able to like switch those people, like they'll become even greater advocates for you.
You know, and perhaps I also think that people that are, whether they're devil's advocates or, you know, haters as people are called these days. I mean, I've come across people today who've kind of, it's all very friendly, tongue in cheek, but they've dropped, you know, said, "Oh, what are you doing? Like, you've had a career, you've done all right for yourself. Who do you think you are? Like, really? Like." And look, I know these people. I love them. They're well-meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also see there's a part of them that, you know, they well, there's a saying that I've been saying for a long time, which is haters, for the most part, in brackets, are confused admirers. And I've often wondered, and again, I don't speak ill of these people because, as I said, I really believe they mean well. I really believe they're looking out for. I really do. I really do. In their own misguided way, I believe that they are, because they're thinking, "Look at you, mate. You're at this age. Like, now you're going to try and embark on this when the market is already overly saturated and like, really, I mean, you know, they're trying to save me from potential, you know, failure or looking bad." And how am I going to look bad? I mean, I don't know. But I don't really care.
But if you enjoy doing it.
And I love doing it. And look, I'm not doing this because I'm trying to impress people or I'm trying to get validation from anybody. Thankfully, and again, one of the great lessons for me that came late, that I've learned to give myself my own validation. You know, I'm actually okay. And you know what the irony is when you actually start to give yourself validation, is that the validation that you were chasing, interestingly, starts coming to you without you having to try. It's an incredible irony that I've discovered through the fact. And again, I'm not saying I've got the highest self-esteem in the world, but it's a hell of a lot better than what it was. You know, and a big part of that is, as much as I care about what people think, but I don't care as much as I used to. And I've learned to understand that, okay, this is just your projection. It's well-meaning, but it's just a projection, and that's okay. I've been able to build enough of a force field around myself where it doesn't penetrate as much. I'm not going to lie and say, "Oh, listen, I'm completely impervious to this." No, that would be a complete lie. Where I am at is that I'm a lot better at not allowing it to affect me as much. And if I do start feeling those feelings, which I told you, you know, I've learned to go, hang on a minute. Shit, what was that? Like, what did I just say? Hang on. To catch myself out, understand that this is just nonsense, and not to dwell in it for weeks. Yeah, I can dwell on it for a day, maybe 2 at best. But after that, I get over it and move on.
And it sounds like you've like, one, you've learned how to acknowledge it or to see it, and then 2, you've put like mechanisms in place to help you manage it, to get over it. You know,
and that took practice. It still does. It still takes conscious awareness and thought. To pick up. Whereas a lot of people, as I did, didn't think about it. It just was an automatic loop. Something would happen. I would just tell myself a story, and then I'd deal with it with drugs or doing other things, right?
Alcohol.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what the drugs were. I mean, it was a way of trying to, you know, ease my pain of all the unresolved stuff that happened to me as a youngster.
Yeah.
That never quite came to the surface.
Yeah, it's a substance. Well, any form of like substance abuse is just to distract your mind and your being from being able to deal or manage with what you went through.
Yeah. You know, it's a coping mechanism. That's all. It's just the way how people cope. They may not be aware of that, but that's what they're actually doing. They're just trying to cope. They're trying to escape the feeling of whatever it is they're feeling that they haven't been able to shake off because of stuff that, for the most part, I would say that, look, I've never met a drug addict or someone who had a problem with drugs that woke up aspiring to be a drug user or abuser or addict, right? You know, but the overwhelming majority of them that are and that struggle with that sort of stuff, whether they realize it or not, when they peel back the onion, it'll come down to something that happened to them as a child, whether it was a certain moment or just a series of things, but quite often stuff that happened when they were young and they never really got over it. Now, some people are stronger and more resilient and manage to do it without drugs, but a lot of people don't, and I was one of those people. And again, until that wasn't explained to me, and more importantly, we got down into and for me, it was about my dad's validation, not ever getting my dad's validation, seeking my dad's approval, right? And also seeking the approval of others and the validation of others, and not allowing myself to say, I'm okay unless you tell me I'm okay, unless you tell me that this is good, right? Being the classic people pleaser, right? Because again, as a youngster, and let's face it, what young boy doesn't want their dad to be proud of him and to be acknowledged? I mean, it's right. It's universal, right?
Yeah.
And so you're seeking that, and it's not forthcoming from your dad, your parents, the people that matter to you the most. The people that matter to you the most, they are your whole entire world. And to not have them say, "I love you, son. I'm proud of you, son." Yeah, And that was never forthcoming. And this is the thing that's really interesting. Again, talking about making mistakes. I mean, even my first marriage, was my final attempt to get my dad's approval because I didn't get my degree. I thought, if I get married to a nice girl, that'll put me in the good books. But guess what? Didn't happen. And I thought, and I was devastating. I thought, okay, kids, what dad cannot be proud of a son who's got giving grandchildren, right? I mean, come on, that's the slam dunk. Well, no, not quite. And that's what really got my drug use really cranking, because then I thought, okay, I've made my bed, I've got to lie in it. That is it for me. I'm done. There's no turning back. And that's when I really, really went on a super, super steep downhill, almost a free fall. Into becoming hugely obese and really having a bad relationship with drugs. So
is that also when like the weight?
Absolutely. Most definitely. Everything. It all sort of culminated into that. And it wasn't until I had that wake up call by my doctor who said, "Listen, I don't know what's going on," and so that's when I had to start the U-turn, right? And then as I started getting all these other things together. The final hurdle for me was my marriage, because it wasn't a happy and look, it wasn't a happy marriage for my ex-wife either, who, I love her. She birthed 3 children for me. You'll never hear me say a bad word. She really got the raw end of the deal in that whole thing. And so I basically had to come to a point where while I was making all these other improvements, I was still desperately unhappy, and it was the marriage that I was in that wasn't serving me, and also wasn't serving and my children too, because kids pick up on that. They may be young, but they're sophisticated. They can read between the lines, and they sense that something's not quite right.
Well, they're sponges.
They are.
So they watch, they observe, and they take that on, and they will make up their own minds, and they can correlate bad situations because they can read energy as well.
But again, this is all the feedback that I didn't pick up on because of this relentless pursuit of trying to get approval and trying to live the life in accordance with the wishes of others, what I thought was the right thing to do, and in the meantime, it was killing me. It was literally killing me. So until I had enough gumption to go, right, I need to remove myself from the situation and start making changes towards becoming my own man and being sovereign and making my own decisions for me and not for everyone else. Yeah. That's when everything really started to change and do better in terms of my physical health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, everything. Just everything started to change once I started to get honest with myself, you know, and have those hard conversations and go deep into the dark places and uncover those things and bring them out. And not do you ever get rid of them. I don't believe that you ever get rid of your demons.
No, you don't.
But you learn to integrate them. You know, an analogy I give people is imagine being an owner-occupier of an apartment in a complex, and there's someone who lives in the building that you really don't like, and they're an owner-occupier too, and they're going nowhere. At some point, you're going to come across them. Doesn't mean you have to be their best friend. And you can't imagine that they're not there. But from time to time, you might bump into each other in the elevator, and you're going to have to be able to at least sort of smile and acknowledge them and know that they're there, right? Until you get off at whatever floor you get off, and then you part ways. But you can't live in that fear all the time of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I think of your darkness or your demons, if you will, as they're there, they're part of you. We all have a dark side. We all have those things that we don't necessarily like about ourselves, but I think once we can accept them and integrate them and realize that that's not the entirety of who we are, then we can actually make progress.
Yeah, and I think it's different for every individual on how deep they go in terms of like their thoughts or their feelings or whatever. And part of that, I think, is because of this concept of like old souls versus new souls. But like I consider myself an old soul, so I go real deep. And my whole, like, I'm not perfect. I've been to the dark depths of drug addiction, making wrong choices, realizing that, you know, and just listening to you then about validation from your dad. Like my dad pretty much exited my life at age 8, you know, and then at age 18 wanted to come back and, you know, like be my best mate and all this. And then something happened on a trip to Vietnam, and like I had bad acne back then, and like, yeah, I won't go into it, but like, or maybe I'll go into it after the podcast. But like I ended up coming back just thinking to myself, who the fuck is this guy? Like, and how dare he say all these things to me and like expect that just because I'm 18, like we can just be like best mates. Like, does he not know that like 10 years of wishing to have a dad that like said that he loved me or said that he was proud of me or things like that actually still haunts me today, because I see dads and their kids in playgrounds and I'm like, that was never me, you know? And yeah, so those demons and those dark places, like, yeah, like they do still come up for me. I do still try to integrate, you know, the learnings from it or whatnot. But then one of my core principles has always been, you know, you can't have light without the dark. You can't enjoy the stars without the night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you can continue to just be a beaming light for other people in whatever situation they're going through or the, you know, the time period that they're in, like that's a great thing. But then also looking at yourself in the mirror and going, you know what, like I need help as well, which is,
Well, I certainly learnt, albeit after my dad passing away, that I had to learn to forgive him because hanging on to that was poison for my system.
Yeah.
But also understand, have enough compassion for him to go that, you know what, and this wasn't giving him a free pass or any validation or acceptance or approval of, but I learnt and accepted that my dad did the best he could with what he had.
Yeah.
And it's all right for me to be able to sit there and judge him because as a father, I've got 3 kids. And while I like to think I've done better in some respects, but I also had the advantage of growing up in a different society in a different way. So I probably had other advantages that my father didn't. And I still get it wrong. I mean, I got an older son who, as of today, this recording, I'm just being honest, doesn't talk to me. Okay, so it's almost like, I don't want to call it a curse, but I mean, I think the relationship I have with my oldest is better than what it was with my dad by a far stretch. But here we are. Okay. And so there's still things to be done and work to be done and whatnot. And I had my moments with my other 2 kids. Thankfully, my youngest, it's been much better. But then he's had the advantage of having a dad, a different version of a dad who learned his lessons, took responsibility for his past.
Yeah.
Made the corrections and still not perfect, but certainly a lot better. And I think to anyone, trying to undo the past and, with trying to make it happen with your dad. And if it's never going to come, if they passed away especially, well, it's definitely not. Well, all you can do is just go, okay, that sucked. And I'm going to forgive him and forgive myself. And if you are a father and got kids, we'll go, okay, you know what? It didn't work out for me the way I hoped it would have, but I'm not going to allow that to get in the way of me being the best dad I can for my own kids. Yeah. And celebrate that. Yeah. And focus on that and make that your triumph.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Exactly.
Knowing that, you're going to make a few muck-ups yourself because you're human, but at the very least, if you can turn that round and take that energy and rather than dwell on what's happened because it's happened and you can't undo it.
Yeah.
You cannot unscramble an egg, but you can make a pretty good omelette, right? So let's just look at how we can take those lessons, go, right, I'm going to do it this way, I'm going to do it with my kids, I'm going to try and adapt, and I'm going to try and grow, and I'm going to try and be a better dad for them. And really find peace with that because there's going to be a point where we're all going to come to an end point. And if we're all lucky enough to get to a deathbed where we actually, we'll get to a deathbed. But seriously, man, I think about this stuff, not because I'm morbid, but because I know that I've got less years ahead of me than I've had on the probability of the average. So if, yes, some people live to 120, I get all that. But, if 85 is the average, I've got 25 years ahead of me. And I will get to a point where if I'm not taken out all of a sudden where what do I want to be thinking about at that point? I'm not going to be worrying about the gold or platinum records or whatever. I want to have my loved ones around me, to just to support me through that transition and not have regrets and not have all this burden like my dad did. My dad, he had that. My dad, when he was on his deathbed, never got to, and that I found was a real tragedy. Real, not to reflect upon that. That really saddens me that my dad never got to really find peace. He was always burdened by whatever was going on that he never talked about, never shared, and I guess that generation were never very open. I'm very open with my kids, very transparent. All again where I went wrong, because I think it's important for them to know that I'm human, right, and that I muck up, but also that I can also do things to change. But I want to get to my deathbed and go, you know what, that was a really amazing life. And yes, there were some errors, and yes, there were some mistakes, and yes, I got 3 PhDs in hindsight. But when I get to that point, I don't want to have that regret of I would have, I could have, I should have. I want to be able to honestly do my heart of hearts, just go, you know what, I made some positive change. I impacted. I helped bring some kids in the world, raise them, make them self-sufficient, make them productive, useful citizens. Did a lot of things that I love to do, had wonderful memories and experiences, right? Because no one can take their Ferrari or the Egyptians tried that with their treasures, and look what happened. They got, right? They just got pillaged, right?
Yeah.
So long as I've got that cachet of wonderful memories and experiences and peace of mind, I think it's been a good run.
Yeah, and I think it's the what's the saying? The cost of regret is greater than the cost of failure.
Yeah.
And it's okay to fail. It's okay to have those experiences. It's okay to want to try something new and realize that you're not good at that, and then adjust again, do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next week is would have been my dad's birthday on the Thursday. He passed away 7 years ago. 5 years ago, I accepted what I now know that he didn't deal with his trauma, and that kind of, came out throughout his life. But I accepted that, and I, apologized, and I said sorry, and all of that. So it's it's an interesting piece when you kind of reflect on people's situations and them not making the right decisions, and you mentioned then as well the generation wasn't about talking about your feelings or talking about the issues that you had, and everything was just swept under the carpet. And
suck it up. Just suck it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas now we're definitely in an age where a lot of that is more accepted, and particularly I think it's accelerated because of all of this online stuff and the need to have mental health checks or, support around your own mental health and stuff. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Tony, thanks for coming along for the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It was a great chat. I loved it.
An hour and a half.
Nice.
It didn't feel like an hour and a half.
No, well, I say when you're having fun, time flies, right?
Yeah. How can people find you for either mastering or mentorship?
Sure. If anyone wants to do any mastering, I'm at jackthebear.com.au.
Yep.
I'm just about to launch my speaking and mentoring website, which is tonymantz.com.
Great.
And on social media, they can get me at Instagram on Mastering Music, Mastering Life, and Facebook on Tony Jack Mantz.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll have all of that stuff come up. So
Beautiful.
People can
watch
it. And
people are welcome to hit me up, and love to hear from them.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for listening in. Freaking Larry's been jumping around us. But thanks for listening in. Make sure you hit subscribe and that notification bell, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. See ya.